The storm rolled in just as Alexander Knight's car pulled into the sleepy coastal town. The billionaire CEO of Knight Hotels wasn't here on business, though the staff at the luxury property he owned would never guess their boss was sleeping just a few floors above them. He'd checked in under another name, craving the one thing his empire could never buy him: anonymity. Tonight, he wasn't the untouchable tycoon the press worshipped and feared. He was simply a man trying to forget. He carried no entourage, wore no tailored suit, and spoke to no one. Even stripped down to the basics, dark coat, rain-dampened hair, Alexander still radiated a presence that made people glance twice. But the sharpness in his eyes, the kind that came from years of ruthless negotiations, softened when he caught sight of something unusual. A woman balanced on a ladder in the hotel's ballroom, stringing fairy lights like she was decorating for a fairy tale. Lila Hart. She hummed softly as she worked, a tune that sounded brighter than the storm raging outside. She had no idea she was being watched, no idea that the man standing in the shadows was one decision away from shattering her quiet, predictable world. When a box of decorations toppled from the table near her, Alexander instinctively stepped forward, catching it before it hit the ground. Their eyes met for the first time. "Oh, thank you," she said breathlessly, brushing her hair out of her face. Then, with a teasing smirk, "Though I suppose if you hadn't startled me by lurking in corners, the box would have survived." Alexander arched a brow. No one talked to him like that. People feared him, revered him, but never teased him. "I wasn't lurking. I was observing." "Aha," she said, unconvinced. "And what's the verdict, Mr. Observer?" His gaze swept over the decorations, the half-finished centerpieces, the scatter of wildflowers on the floor. "It's messy," Lila gasped theatrically, placing a hand over her chest. "Messy. These are hours of my blood, sweat, and glitter glue, thank you very much." The corners of his mouth twitched, a near smile threatening to break through his mask. "You're very spirited. And you're very mysterious," she countered. "Checking in during a storm, hiding in dark corners, criticizing someone else's decor. Are you a spy or just really bored?" Alexander should have walked away. She wasn't his type. She wasn't part of his world. But for reasons he couldn't explain, he lingered. Something about her, the warmth, the quick wit, the way she looked him in the eye without hesitation, pulled at him. And Lila, though she didn't want to admit it, felt the same tug. There was something about this stranger that unsettled her in the most dangerous way. She didn't believe in fate, not anymore, but standing there beneath the fairy lights, she wondered if fate believed in her. If only she knew the truth. If only she knew the man teasing her about glitter glue was Alexander Knight, the billionaire playboy the tabloids never stopped chasing. The man she had sworn to avoid her entire life. One night, one conversation, and already the game had begun. "Tell me, have you ever met someone who instantly rattled your world in a way you didn't expect?" The next morning, Lila Hart was already darting around the hotel ballroom with her clipboard in hand. The Easter Gala was less than a week away, and as the event planner responsible for the entire production, she was juggling florists, caterers, and a staff of volunteers who treated her more like a sister than a boss. She thrived on the chaos until she saw him again. The mysterious guest from last night was leaning casually against the doorway, sleeves rolled up, hair still damp from a morning run along the cliffs. He looked nothing like the ordinary tourist he claimed to be. Everything about him screamed power, from the way he carried himself to the watch glinting on his wrist. But it wasn't just his presence that rattled her. It was the way his gaze lingered on her like she was the only thing worth watching. "Don't tell me you're here to critique my decor again," she called, narrowing her eyes. He tilted his head. "Would you believe me if I said I came for the view?" Her lips parted, heat rising to her cheeks at the blatant flirtation. "Smooth, Mr. Observer. Do you practice that in front of a mirror?" His chuckle was low, rich, and dangerously intimate. "I don't need practice." Lila rolled her eyes, but she couldn't deny the spark in her chest. She had sworn off charming strangers years ago, but something about him unsettled her resolve. Name, she demanded suddenly. If you're going to keep haunting my events, I at least deserve a name. Daniel, he lied smoothly. Alexander Knight was too risky here. Daniel Reed. She eyed him skeptically. Daniel Reed. Sounds suspiciously like the name of a romance novel hero. Should I expect a tragic backstory and a mysterious past? He smirked. Would that make you more interested? Her laughter filled the room, bright and unguarded. Alexander found himself leaning closer, desperate to catch every sound. It was absurd. He hadn't laughed freely in years, hadn't allowed anyone close enough to touch the raw edges beneath his control. Yet this woman with ink on her fingers and glitter in her hair made him want to linger. That evening the crisis struck. The florist called to cancel, leaving Lila without the centerpiece arrangement she'd promised. She pressed a hand to her forehead, panic clawing at her. Alexander found her kneeling on the ballroom floor, surrounded by buckets of wildflowers she had gathered herself. Her hands moved quickly, weaving makeshift arrangements into glass jars, determination etched on her face. "You're really going to do all this by yourself?" he asked. She looked up, strands of hair falling into her flushed face. "Unless you've suddenly developed a secret talent for floral design, yes." A slow smile tugged at his lips. "I'm better with brushstrokes, but I can take direction." To her shock, he rolled up his sleeves and sat beside her, clumsily arranging wildflowers as if he were any other volunteer. Their shoulders brushed as they worked, and every accidental touch sparked heat under her skin. "You're terrible at this," she teased, holding up his uneven bouquet. "Criticism from the master herself," he murmured, leaning close enough that she caught the faint scent of cedar and rain. "Though I'm enjoying the company more than the lesson." Her breath caught. No one had ever looked at her like that. Not like a project, not like a consolation prize, but as though she was the most intriguing thing in the room. For Alexander, the moment was dangerous. He'd promised himself never to blur lines, never to mix real feelings with fleeting connections. Yet here he was, helping a small-town planner arrange wildflowers and feeling more alive than he had in years. Over the next few days, Daniel, found excuses to linger near Lila. He watched her charm guests, soothe tempers, and handle disasters with a mix of grit and grace. Each time, he peeled back another layer of her, and with each layer, he fell deeper into a fascination he couldn't control. She too felt it. The banter, the tension, the stolen glances. It was a rhythm she couldn't resist. But Lila had been burned before. She reminded herself daily. Mysterious men were trouble. Especially ones who kissed with their eyes long before their lips touched. And then came the night of the rehearsal dinner. The ballroom shimmered with fairy lights, the tables gleamed, and the air buzzed with laughter. When Alexander entered, every head turned, though none recognized him as the billionaire behind the empire. He wore confidence like a tailored suit. His gaze locked only on her. Later, when the music slowed, he extended his hand. "Dance with me." She hesitated. "I don't even know who you really are." "You know enough," he said softly, and something in his tone made her heart stumble. Against her better judgment, she placed her hand in his. The world narrowed to the feel of his hand on her waist, the steady rhythm of his breath, the flicker of lights around them. As they moved together, it felt less like a dance and more like a confession neither dared speak. "Careful," she whispered. "People will start to think you actually like me." He leaned closer, lips brushing her ear. "What if I do?" Her laughter faltered, replaced by a shiver that ran down her spine. She wanted to pull away, to keep her walls intact. But when their eyes met, she saw something raw, something vulnerable. And against every warning her heart screamed. She let herself fall into the moment. Their dance ended with silence lingering between them, heavy with promises neither dared voice. But Lila's instincts were sharp. She noticed the way Staff whispered when he passed, the way his gaze darkened whenever his phone buzzed with a call he refused to answer. "Who are you, Daniel?" she asked one evening, narrowing her eyes. He held her gaze, then offered the half-truth that had protected him for years. A man who enjoys your company more than he should. The answer left her flustered, but also suspicious. He was hiding something big. And she wasn't sure if she wanted to uncover it or run as far as possible before it broke her heart. Meanwhile, Alexander was fighting his own war. His board called daily, pressuring him to finalize the merger that would make headlines across the country. One wrong move, one whiff of scandal, and months of negotiation would collapse. Yet all he could think about was a woman who arranged wildflowers and believed in fairy lights. He should have walked away. He should have checked out of the hotel and left Lila Hart in peace. But when she laughed, when she rolled her eyes at his arrogance, when she leaned close enough for him to catch the scent of vanilla and dreams, he knew walking away wasn't an option. Not anymore. And that was the beginning of the danger. Because Alexander Knight, the man who controlled empires, couldn't even control his own heart. What about you? Have you ever felt pulled toward someone you knew you shouldn't want, but couldn't resist anyway? The days leading up to the Easter Gala blurred into a whirlwind of candle orders, seating charts, and last-minute crises. For Lila, it should have been exhausting. And yet, every stolen moment with Alexander, Daniel, left her with a strange energy, like her heart was living in overdrive. Sometimes he was teasing, cocky, impossible. Other times, he surprised her with quiet gestures, carrying boxes without being asked, bringing her coffee exactly the way she liked it, even listening when she rambled about her dream of opening her own studio. "You don't just want to plan weddings," he observed one evening as they walked along the pier. The sea breeze tangled her hair, and he tucked a strand behind her ear before she could stop him. "You want to create magic people remember forever." She blinked up at him, startled by how accurately he saw her. "Most people just think I like glitter too much." His lips curved, but his eyes were serious. "Most people aren't paying attention." The words lodged in her chest. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it scared her. The attraction between them was no longer a spark. It was a wildfire neither could contain. And yet both fought it in their own ways. Alexander kept telling himself to stay away. He had a board breathing down his neck, a merger worth billions at stake, and a reputation built on control. What would happen if the world discovered he was spending nights in a small coastal town, tangled up in the life of a woman whose only empire was a stack of unpaid bills and a stubbornly hopeful heart? And Lila. She fought with memories of betrayal. Every time he looked at her like she was precious, she reminded herself, men with secrets destroy women like her. But temptation had a way of winning. One late evening, after hours of frantic decorating, Lila slumped into a chair in the empty ballroom. Exhaustion claimed her, but so did relief. The space shimmered with fairy lights, pastel ribbons, and tables that looked like something out of a dream. "You did it," came his voice from behind her. She turned, startled, to see Alexander standing in the doorway, jacket slung over his shoulder, shirt collar undone. He looked less like a guest and more like temptation incarnate. "Barely," she admitted, rubbing her temples. "I think my hands might fall off from tying bows." He crossed the room and crouched in front of her, his hand brushing hers away to massage her temples himself. She froze. "You don't have to do that. Relax," he said softly. "Just this once, let someone take care of you." Her eyes fluttered shut, a sigh escaping before she could stop it. The intimacy of the moment was almost unbearable. When she opened her eyes, his were on her lips. "Daniel," she whispered, a warning she didn't mean. He bent closer. "Tell me you don't want this, and I'll stop." Her heart thundered. She should stop him. She should. But instead, her breath caught as his lips brushed hers, soft at first, then deepening into something that unraveled every defense she'd built. The kiss was fire and surrender, a confession in silence. By the time they pulled apart, her hands were tangled in his shirt, and his forehead rested against hers like he couldn't let go. "I shouldn't," she began. "I know," he murmured. "Neither should I." But neither of them moved away. The night of the gala arrived, dazzling and electric. Guests in glittering gowns and tailored suits filled the ballroom, praising the decor and whispering about the event planner who'd turned a simple coastal hotel into a fairy tale. Lila glowed as she moved through the room, her dress simple but elegant, her smile radiant. She didn't notice the stares she drew, but Alexander did. He couldn't stop watching her. She laughed with guests, danced with children, charmed donors into pledging generous amounts for charity. Every moment made him want her more. And every moment made it harder to keep the truth from her. Because eventually she would find out. And she did. It happened when she returned to the staff office to grab her notes. On the desk lay a confidential guest list, left behind by an assistant. She scanned it absent-mindedly, until one name stopped her cold. Alexander Knight. Chief Executive Officer, Knight Hotels International. Her blood ran cold. Well, it couldn't be. But the pieces snapped together with cruel precision. The way staff deferred to him, the expensive watch, the phone calls he ignored, the way his eyes sometimes carried the weight of an empire. Her chest tightened. He wasn't Daniel Reed. He was a billionaire who had lied to her face, let her bear the soul that she is, and kissed her under fairy lights, all while pretending to be someone else. When she returned to the ballroom, her smile was gone. She found him near the balcony, watching her with that same vulnerable hunger. "Alexander Knight," she spat, voice low but shaking. "Ring any bells?" His expression stilled, the mask slipping. "Lila, don't." Her voice cracked, but her fury carried it forward. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? Do you think I'm some charity project? A distraction while you play pretend in my town?" "It wasn't like that," he said quickly, desperation breaking through his usual control. "I never meant to lie. I just needed to be someone else for a while. And then I met you, and I couldn't walk away." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "Of course you couldn't. Rich men like you never can. You take what you want, and then you leave." "That's not true," he said, stepping closer. "You're not just." "Stop," she cut in, her voice trembling. "Don't make me believe you. I've already done that once, and it nearly destroyed me." She turned and walked away, leaving him alone on the balcony with the wreckage of everything he hadn't known he needed. The days after the gala were brutal. Lila buried herself in work, ignoring his calls, refusing to see him. She plastered on smiles for clients and volunteers, but at night she cried into her pillow, hating herself for still wanting him despite the betrayal. Alexander, meanwhile, was unraveling. For the first time in years, business didn't consume him. He missed meetings, ignored merger updates, and instead spent hours sketching her face from memory, the tilt of her smile, the defiance in her eyes. He tried reaching her in small ways. He showed up early to help set up for the town fair. He carried crates, fixed decorations, even spent an afternoon handing out flyers in the rain. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded one day, unable to ignore him any longer. "Because I don't know how to stay away," he admitted, rain dripping down his hair, shirt clinging to his chest. "Because you make me want to be the kind of man who deserves you." Her chest squeezed painfully. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to hate him. She wanted both at once. The merger deadline loomed. His board grew restless, demanding he return to the city and reclaim control. But Alexander couldn't think about billion-dollar deals when the only thing he wanted was slipping away. So he made a choice. At the high society Easter Gala in the city, a press-heavy, reputation-defining event, he walked into the ballroom with Lila on his arm. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. His board stared in horror. Alexander ignored them all. "This is Lila Hart," he announced to anyone who dared question. "She's not my date. She's the woman I love." Lila froze, her heart slamming in her chest. She hadn't agreed to this. She hadn't even forgiven him fully. But when she looked at him, saw the raw honesty in his eyes, the vulnerability he never showed anyone, her defenses faltered. He was risking everything. His deal, his reputation, his empire. For her. And for the first time she let herself wonder. Maybe he meant it. The weeks that followed were messy, imperfect, and real. Lila didn't forgive him overnight. She made him work for every ounce of trust, and he gave it willingly. He told her about his past, about the fiancé who'd shattered his heart, about the loneliness of being untouchable. He showed her his paintings, raw sketches of landscapes, portraits, and one unfinished piece of her in the wildflower field. And slowly, Lila opened her heart again. She realized he wasn't the man she thought she should avoid. He was the man who had been searching for someone to see him, not the empire he controlled. Their love wasn't perfect, but it was real. Tell me, if someone you loved lied about who they were but then risked everything to prove themselves to you, would you give them a second chance? The days after Alexander's public declaration were chaos. For him, headlines screamed scandal. Billionaire CEO walks into gala with mystery woman. Investors panicked, the board demanded explanations, and the merger hung by a thread. For Lila, whispers followed her everywhere. Small-town friends bombarded her with questions. Clients eyed her with suspicion. Was she using her events business to climb the social ladder? The fairy tale kiss at the gala had become everyone's favorite story. But behind closed doors, she wasn't celebrating. She was terrified. One evening, as she packed floral samples in her studio, she caught sight of Alexander leaning against the doorway. He wore no suit this time, just jeans and a dark sweater. His hair windswept from the rain outside. He looked less like a billionaire and more like the man who had once tied bows beside her, who had kissed her like the world could end at any second. "Still pretending to be Daniel Reed?" she asked quietly, her eyes fixed on the roses in her hands. He flinched but didn't leave. "No, not anymore. I'm done hiding." Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. Finally he said, "The board gave me an ultimatum. End the distraction or lose the deal." She set the roses down, her pulse stumbling. "So that's what I am. A distraction." "No," his voice cracked like thunder. He stepped closer, desperate. "Lila, listen to me. You're the only thing in my life that feels real. I've built empires, signed contracts worth billions, and I've never felt more alive than when I was stringing fairy lights with you." Her throat tightened, but she forced steel into her voice. "And what happens when you wake up and realize I don't belong in your world?" He shook his head. "Then I'll leave my world behind. Because none of it matters without you." The words sank into her chest, heavy and dangerous. He was offering her everything, and she didn't know if she could trust him with her heart. Not yet. A week later she got her answer. The town spring festival was in full swing. Lanterns glowed above cobblestone streets, music drifted from the square, and the air smelled of sugared almonds and fresh bread. Children darted past, laughter carrying into the night. Lila had agreed to volunteer, arranging flower crowns at a booth. But as she handed a daisy chain to a little girl, a murmur rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, phones lifted. Alexander Knight was here. Not in tailored Armani, not with bodyguards or assistants, but alone. In rolled-up sleeves, hands smudged with charcoal, carrying a large canvas. He set the easel in the center of the square. The crowd pressed closer, curious. With sure, confident strokes he began to paint. Lila's heart pounded as she watched. Colors bloomed under his brush, wildflowers, golden light, and at the center, a woman with windswept hair, eyes fierce and full of hope. The crowd gasped. She couldn't breathe. When he finally stepped back, he turned, his eyes locking on hers through the sea of people. "This is Lila Hart," he said, his voice carrying. "She's the reason I remembered who I was before the money, before the lies. She's the woman I love. And I'm not leaving this town, or her, until she knows I mean it." A hush fell over the square. Lila's cheeks burned as every eye turned to her. Her instincts screamed to run. But her heart whispered stay. Slowly, she stepped forward, weaving through the crowd until she stood before him. You can't just paint me into your life and expect it to fix everything, she whispered, her voice trembling. I don't expect it to fix anything, he said softly, his gaze searching hers. I just needed you to know I'm done hiding. I'll fight for you, Lila, even if it takes forever. Her chest ached, the walls she'd built around her heart cracking under the weight of his words. And then, like a tide she couldn't hold back, truth spilled from her lips. You terrify me. Because I want you so much it feels like losing you would break me in half. His breath caught, and for a moment, vulnerability flickered in his eyes, raw and real. Then let's be terrified together. Something in her broke loose. With tears stinging her eyes, she reached up, tangled her fingers in his shirt, and kissed him. Hard, desperate, like all the fear and longing between them had finally erupted. The square erupted in cheers, lanterns glowing brighter as if the town itself celebrated their surrender. In the weeks that followed, love was no longer a possibility. It was a decision, fought for daily. Alexander worked tirelessly to prove his devotion. He made time no matter how hectic his business grew. He showed up to her events with flowers, learned to tie bows without ruining the ribbon, even convinced investors to sponsor her dream studio as part of the merger charity fund. But it wasn't just the grand gestures. It was the quiet ones. Cooking her pasta when she forgot to eat, brushing flour from her cheek when she baked, tracing lazy circles on her back when she fell asleep on his chest. And for Lila, trust grew slowly but steadily. She no longer saw a billionaire in her arms. She saw the man who had chosen her, who had risked everything to be by her side. Their love became a dance of vulnerability and desire, laughter and arguments, apologies and forgiveness. Imperfect, messy, real. And it was enough. Months later, on a golden summer evening, Alexander led her back to the wildflower field where everything had begun. The air shimmered with warmth, the horizon painted in hues of pink and amber. He stopped at the spot where he had first kissed her, then turned, a small velvet box in his hand. Lila gasped. Don't panic, he said quickly, though his voice trembled. This isn't a corporate deal. There are no terms, no contracts. Just one question. He opened the box to reveal a ring. Simple, elegant, timeless. Lila Hart, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't want you because you fit into my world. I want you because you became my world. Will you marry me? Her eyes blurred with tears. For a moment, the ghosts of her past whispered fear. But louder still was the voice that had carried her through every moment since. Her own, finally daring to believe in forever. She smiled, radiant and trembling. Yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and as he kissed her, the wildflowers bent in the breeze like the earth itself was bowing to their love. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And it was the kind of love worth breaking every rule for. So tell me, if love demanded you risk everything you thought you knew, would you choose safety? Or would you take the leap, like Lila and Alexander, and bet everything on the one person you shouldn't have wanted, but couldn't live without? The story of Alexander and Lila reminds us that love rarely arrives the way we expect. It doesn't follow the rules of status, reputation, or timing. Sometimes the person we shouldn't want is exactly the one who makes us whole. Alexander, once the untouchable tycoon, learned that walls built to keep out pain also keep out joy. Lila, branded unlucky in love, discovered that her worth was never tied to heartbreak or small-town whispers. It was waiting for someone brave enough to see it. Together they risked everything. His empire, her pride, their fears of being broken again. And in the end, they won not just a love story, but a partnership built on trust, laughter, and second chances. And maybe that's why this story resonates so deeply. Because at its core, it isn't about a billionaire or an event planner. It's about us. About anyone who has been hurt before, anyone who has wondered if love is worth the risk, anyone who has been tempted to protect themselves by walking away. What about you? If love knocked on your door disguised as the last person you thought you should want, would you answer? Would you take the risk, or would you play it safe? Let me know in the comments because I would love to hear your thoughts. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who believes in love against all odds, and subscribe to Made of Love for more unforgettable romance stories every week. Your support helps us create more tales that celebrate passion, heartbreak, and redemption. And remember, every time you comment, share, or hit that subscribe button, you're not just following a story. You're becoming part of this community. A community that knows love isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. So until the next story, hold on to hope, hold on to second chances, and above all, never be afraid to love the one you shouldn't, because that might just be the love that saves you. Sometimes the love we fear the most is the love that transforms us the deepest. True connection means tearing down walls, risking vulnerability, and daring to choose the one person who makes us feel alive, even when the world says we shouldn't.